is doing and answering the hard questions. Thank you, Dr. Jagdeo, for this opportunity. In like this being your first time candidacy, I think you should take the lead on this one. You know, there must be a lot that women, Guyanese of different walks of life would want to know. And I'm supposing, heading up TBN, you would know a lot of the questions there. So I would leave you to start this one.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Rodriguez. Thank you very much, Vice President Jagdeo. Before we get into what the government is doing, there was a very serious incident that occurred yesterday. A man was able to stab a presidential guard 5 times and disarm another presidential guard, all in the process while asking for the president. Now, obviously, this caused a lot of concern, both nationally and internationally. TBN then spoke because when the news came out, we heard it was in the media that a man was a Nigerian national. Daybreak News then spoke with the president of the Nigerian Association, who said that the man is not known to the association or members of the Nigerian community that are part of that association. Has the government gotten any word via the police force that can confirm that the man is in fact a Nigerian national?
Yes, we can confirm that he is a Nigerian national.
Any other information as to how long he's been in Guyana, what his motives were?
Yes, he came in just a few days after the 2020 elections. In fact, it was the 14th of March, 2020. He came into the country with 6 orders.
Any information as to his motive? Why would somebody want to do such an act?
We don't want to be premature in our judgment. I think there is a full investigation going on. We're not sparing any effort to get to the truth. We have to see if it is just an isolated act or a conspiracy. And therefore, the task force that is working on this will go through a number of leads that they have. I guess at some point in time, they will report back to the authorities. But right now, that investigation is going on with vigor and in earnest to get to the truth of the matter.
That type of security breach, I'm sure, is concerning for government.
Yes.
Have there been any efforts started to improve the level of security at the president's official residence?
Yes, it happened suddenly, and you can't prevent these things from happening. It is to ensure that you're ready when they do happen. And therefore, the state of readiness of the Presidential Guard and how they acted in this incident should inform the future security arrangements and also the level of training that they receive. So this incident there would be one that hopefully would help to enhance security arrangements across the country, particularly as they relate to our head of state. We have to do so without having a siege mentality in government. Even without threats, Mr. Granger had like 12, 13 vehicles following him around. And people think maybe that's appropriate given threats in our country. We're not a country that is known for that sort of threat to politicians, historically. Whether we need to do that now is another matter. But we don't want to to have a siege mentality where for the president to go anywhere or any government official to go anywhere, they have to layer on excessive security that will prevent this personal touch with our people. Because it is that personal touch that characterizes not just President Ali, but the PPP's engagement in office. We've always prided ourselves in remaining in touch with people on the grassroots, going to visit their communities, listening to them. If we are excessively security conscious, it may become a barrier to that sort of approach with the communities. But definitely a lot more has to be done. And from the intelligence perspective, especially if this is organized. So there's a lead that is going there in that direction, and it has borne some early fruits. We don't want to be premature, as I said, but we have to address, if that's the case, then there has to be an appropriate response to, and from especially the intelligence gathering to thwart plans of this nature. We also have to be very intolerant to people who try to create the conditions, almost the intellectual authors, for these maverick acts, if this is maverick, to take place. And then they quickly distance themselves from it. But if you look at the tenure, the language and some used by the opposition and some of their aligned websites, you will see that almost, I can list about 15, show you video images of 15 instances where people were called upon to damage public property or to attack people from the government. I can share with you that evidence. It's there in the form of video images. So I noticed a quick statement, oh, we don't support this. But if you don't support that, then you can't support a narrative that could lead to this. And that is what we have to become intolerant of. That we have to take firm action against people who try to incite division along racial lines, along gender lines, along religious lines. We have to be intolerant of those people. And also those who publicly call for individuals, their supporters, to harm others. We have to address that issue. And they do so almost with impunity now under the guise of free speech. But you can have free speech in this country. We have always fought for free speech, free media, and our country is one of the freest in that sense. But it is not free speech when you ask someone or call upon someone to harm another individual or person of another religion or race. That's not free speech. That needs the laws of our country, the Racial Hostility Act, our Constitution, in fact, finds this abhorrent. And we need to take strong action against that sort of issue. So whilst we're examining this matter carefully, and the police are investigating to see if they're intellectual authors and who they are, and to bring them to justice, we need to also focus on those other issues that I mentioned before.
So there is going to be a set plan to do that. How soon?
It's something that where you have to evolve different approaches. So it's not like one issue that you can say there is a set plan. Clearly, we need to improve the readiness of the security forces, particularly those who take care of the president's security and security of others. Clearly, that is on the cards. Strengthening the intelligence agencies without becoming intrusive in people's lives, and then being intolerant to divisive rhetoric or criminal rhetoric, that is rhetoric to harm others, is not just a task for government. We can take the law enforcement approach to it, but it has to be a societal rejection of this. It's a task for the media and the political parties of our country and also civil society to reject that, to ensure that it doesn't get disguised, this divisive rhetoric, the criminal behavior doesn't get disguised on the free speech.
Dr. Jagdeo, if I may, is the government looking seriously? One of the glaring possibilities is 2 days before, basically 48 hours, within 48 hours before the attack on the president's home, and by extension on the president himself, because that area is secured for one purpose, to take care of the president. The mayor of Georgetown, Raj Narayan, made comments to suggest that we are heading to a Muslim state, insightful comments. And then within that 48 hours, just before the attacks, there was also an instance where he was protesting, and in the comments, as the videos were broadcasted live to Guyanese in the world, threats were made clear. Personal life and the president's life on that live video. How far is it since there were never attacks like this before? Threats then were made in comments showing the insightful ways working, and then this attack. Is the armed forces looking at this as one of the serious leads?
Well, clearly they would have to examine that, because I think this was captured in the live stream. We have images, and so those who were streaming this this content, they would have to answer for it. And I hope that the security forces also would look into this matter. Along the same lines that we must not allow people to get away with this sort of behavior. They could have easily intervened and say, we don't tolerate this. When the person made that comment about killing President Ali, killing me, etc. So clearly they have to be held to account. We don't, as I said before, we don't want to be premature to say it's directly related, but that creates the same tone of tolerance to this sort of criminal behavior. If you have people coming on your page and they're vile and they make remarks that are racist or criminal, then you're in effect tolerating it. You should be held responsible. On the mayor's thing about the Muslim state and stuff, I think it's utter nonsense. I'm a Hindu. I'm part of the government. I'm the general secretary of the People's Progressive Party. Our party was not formed on the basis of religion. Irfan Ali is a member of the executive of our party. We have other members of the executive who are Christians. So all the faiths are represented in our party. When our party was established, it was established to fight for independence and to change the lives of working people of this country. And it has remained faithful. If you look at our manifestos throughout the period we've been in office, we've remained faithful to that philosophy of working to change people's lives regardless of their race, their religion, or their gender. So we are not a party that is based on a religion, and we don't create a state that is based on a religion. The state the state doesn't have a religion. So that is a nonsense that the mayor was talking about. But I think he did it politically, because that's how you try to divide people. APNU is very clever at this sort of thing. They do it on the race, but on the race side, a lot of people are ignoring them now. So I think they want to open a new front now in Guyana, one that we are not accustomed to. So a Hindu-Muslim divide. And that is why they chose this clown, the mayor, to shoot the first salvo. But it's nonsense, utter nonsense. As I said before, the party that I head as General Secretary, we know what we're grounded in. And we're grounded in change for the better, development for all of our people. Religion and which faith you belong to does not factor into our decision making when we talk about progress.
Dr. Jagdeo, if I may, on behalf of the people of this country, I know you were saying you don't want to be premature in decision making, but being president of this country for 12 years, your tenure covered some very trying times. This country has experienced many times the dark days. Before that was more fire, slow fire, and it always started one way and it ended up with the destruction of people's property, people's lives, and there was always the PNC behind it. Are you saying clearly the mayor was on the ground, his intentions were clear, although he came and gave a half-hearted apology? Are you saying that we're not sure what the PNC is, knowing your experience and history, having history on your side?
So, to get an answer to that question, just listen to every speech of the leader of the opposition. And then you will get a clear, unequivocal answer to that question that you just asked me. He's always been threatening in posture and language and divisive in his rhetoric. Always been. No matter what the topic is, because he hardly deals with technical issues that are important for development. It's always, the PNC has become a French party now, a party of protest, a party that is of incitement. If you look at what the leader says every time he speaks, and this is followed by the rhetoric from all of his members of parliament. You just listen to them. So that is why I have pointed out publicly, look at Linden. And they did absolutely nothing for housing in Linden in the 5 years under APNU. We had, before that, we had built Block 22 and Amelia's Ward with thousands of new houses. They did absolutely nothing. They shared no land to the hundreds, in fact, the thousands of people who live in Linden who wanted a plot of land to build a home on. They gave them, they had nothing to give to them. They gave, after the elections and just before the elections, to their key activists, the Figueres and the others, large plots of land, transfer those to them. Lowenfield got 200 acres. That's enough to put down 1,000 low-income homes, 200 acres, in a place called Middle East Hideout. Those are the people who got the land. We came into office, President Ali went up, he said, we're going to spend $400 million in Amelia's Ward to develop 400 new plots there for people. Suddenly, you had some protesters on the road to block the project. APNU joined with them, encouraged them to block that development. That is bringing now, because we had to deal with the protesters. 400 persons in Linden would get a plot of land here. We're spending $400 million. We're doing another 1,000 lots and houses in Linden. Maka, we came to Maka. The same thing happened. First of all, they behaved that as though they have exclusive control over the people of Mako. So you cannot go into Mako without consulting with Congress Place or the Lord Mayor of Mako. You have to get their permission to go into Mako. And even more so, if you want to do something that will benefit the people of Mako. So the president must write a letter of application to Norton, and he has to stamp approval, then you can go into Mako. Now the people who live in Mako are our people. They're citizens of this country. They need to benefit from everything that takes place. I had this exact same behavior, so it's not changed. From the mayor of New Amsterdam when he didn't want me to go into Angois Avenue. But of course we ignored him then, and we're ignoring the local authority leaders here. But we have about a few squatters along the way there, and again, instead of working with us to accommodate the people there, the squatters, like we did in London, we worked with the people who were squatting there and trying to block the project. They took a hostile position. Now, what will happen to Mako when a 4-lane road passes just next door to Mako? Mako becomes frontland. The property values will skyrocket in that area because they're closer to development rather than being tucked away into backlands. It will change the entire dynamic, like how the road network going through South Georgetown is changing. So building a 4-lane road going through South Georgetown, a hotel will be close to South Georgetown, a minute away from South Georgetown. You'll have a massive new hospitals, a whole range of activities, changing the face there. Same thing, Pontrench. The people in Pontrencham, they have an area there with a few places that people squatted on. They're earning a living, and for years. But we need to bring change. We're putting in a boulevard. We're putting in some new roads, like what we're doing on Lanham Street and everywhere else. That will change property values for all of the people there, change the whole outlook for development in that area. Because not only will property values go up, more businesses would start locating there. Again, they took the side of a few people here. And the same thing with Georgetown Hospital. Now, Georgetown Hospital, from 2015, you had a few vendors there. Maybe about every CEO of the hospital under the PPP, from my can to the last one who was there, 2 CEOs under the PNC, in the 5 years, wrote the city council about this problem. So it didn't, not just PPP complain about it or PPP administrations of the Georgetown Public Hospital, but you're blocking the entrance to the main hospital. People have to go through there, ambulances, taxis, etc. Now that again, instead of working, they hostile to the removal because they saw it as a cause for a protest to stir up trouble in the country. Now, having said all of this, do we believe that vendors should we have vendors in there? We support vendors. We support vendors. We believe everyone should have the right to earn a living. Everyone. We will support vending across the country because once people want to start a small business, etc. But as a vendor too, you can't do it to discomfort other people or to prevent some vital functions of the places where your vending taking place. You have to do it in a responsible manner. You get the full support of a PPP government because we believe that everyone should earn a living.
Dr. Jagdeo, how do you respond to the criticism that the decision to move the vendors came at an inopportune time? That it's close to Christmas and persons would have, persons are trying to make money to support their families, to, enjoy the Christmas holidays. So that's one.
We had 5 Christmases passed from 2015, and we couldn't find an opportune time. It's not a now alone. It is 7 years now this has been going on. It's becoming a crisis, even now more so because of the Christmas season. The ambulances can't pass at all because you have congregation of people there. When you have your mother or your child sitting in an ambulance or in a taxi waiting to go through there, and they're about to breathe their last breath, you tell them that the vendor's right to vend illegally there trumps their right to life, and then I will support those people who are there. When that decision could be made in a country like ours, then we'll support this. But unless that is happening, they didn't ask to go elsewhere. We have to find places for people to vend somewhere else. We can work with the council. But here in a particular spot, the entrance, people want to just come out there. Everything is convenient to the vendors, not to the public. So I've been saying this is several years. We've heard this all the time about, it's Christmas season. They don't vend, the vendors there don't sell decorations for Christmas. They don't sell decorations for Christmas. It's not like the market square. They don't sell Christmas decorations and stuff. So the thing is that there will never be an opportune time. But the city council has been notified several times. It's becoming a crisis there for people seeking medical help. Government cannot abdicate its responsibility to. So this is it. But they descended again. That's why I'm saying this has become a party that is not focused on development. It finds out, it hunts out all the French where people have issues, and it takes their side to prevent development from taking place. So in the case of Pantran, they don't see a boulevard, they don't see 2 new spanking new roads that will change the lives of the community. They see 5 persons who can disrupt the government project. That's what they see. Because if that happens, heavens forbid, the people there may support the PPP if the project goes through, and that is how they see it with a political spectrum.
How do you respond to the mayor's contention that the decision to move the vendors should have been solely the responsibility of City Hall and not government?
Yes.
That's one. And there's obviously a strained relationship between the mayor and city council and the government. However, just looking around the city, it is clear that the city is not to the standard that it ought to be. And it's the citizens are the ones who are actually suffering. Is government going to intervene? Is government going to extend an olive branch? What exactly is going to happen?
I'm glad you raised that, because if the citizens of Georgetown are not satisfied, then they should change the party that has run this council from independence. And it's one party that has run Georgetown from independence. When our city was considered the Garden City of the Caribbean, to what it was, you recall, pre-1992, when you couldn't drive on a single road in Georgetown. Not Main Street, there was no Norton Street, not Lamaha Street, nothing. You couldn't drive. Kitty was ghost town. That is what they took it from the Garden City of the Caribbean to a dump in 92. The investments we have put in the city from 1992 has been unprecedented. Now, if the citizens of Georgetown are so serious about service, then they should vote to change the party that has run this place as their property. There's no accountability. For 10 years, gap in the financial accounts, the audits, etc. at City Hall. No audit financial statements are all done in a questionable manner. We had the same situation in central government when we took over. For 10 years, there had been no audited reports for the country, in 1992. From 1982 to 1992, no audited accounts for the country. We didn't know how much we borrowed, how much we spent, how much we collected as revenue, because there are no audited statements presented to the Auditor General. He was prohibited, the Auditor General, by a letter from auditing accounts. They were never prepared and sent in. 1992 to 2022, every single year, the accounts of this country is being audited because of the legacy of the people. We changed it immediately. It was hard in the early days, but if we can do it for the country, they can produce accounts for the city that are proper. That's the first point. So if the residents are concerned, they would first of all teach this group that is not focused on development. Secondly, call for greater accountability. Thirdly, if they're so concerned, in the city, the responsibility for roads are those of the city. The responsibility for drainage are those of the city. The responsibility for garbage collection is that of the city. All of these services, markets, etc. The council here, the PNC council, has not been fixing roads in the city for the last 15 years. Every road you can drive on now in the city has been fixed, billions of dollars by the central government. We fixed the outfalls, we fixed drainage systems in the city, we put in the lights in the city, the stoplights, etc., traffic control. A whole range of responsibilities that are those of the city that's been taken over and funded to the tune of billions of dollars by the central government. Because you can't put the money in that council here. They would take every revenue that they collect now goes towards paying wages and salaries. So, if the people of Georgetown are really serious, they should dump this group down there that is currently running the city and ask, someone else to do that. So you coming back to the key issue about, the mayor said he is responsible, the government took over his responsibility to remove the vendors because from 2015, they are more interested in collecting money illegally from vendors than cleaning up the city of Georgetown. Just by the city, by the hospital. When I was president, I went here and on a street, you saw the paved areas. I walked around and I said, let's try to pave this area so we can have more parking for doctors and a few patients. We paved that. Soon as APNU, the PPP came out of office, APNU went and put barriers around it and wanted to charge people for the area that we paved. When I was president, we paved just around the Georgetown Hospital here. That's all they do.
What about the argument that the city hall is not being given adequate subventions?
So the subvention is, I just spoke to you about the accountability. Adequate means that, the taxpayers of this country, must sit down every year, hand the city council billions of dollars. They collect all the revenue from the city, which runs into billions too, and spend it on themselves. And we must then take additional taxpayers' money, give it to them, and then they can't account for it. That's the logic. They do get a subvention, a substantial subvention every year. So they're not that adequacy is based on their perception. Adequacy. But that is why we look at the total spending in the city. If we had handed the money to them to do a single road that we're doing now in the city, They would spend every cent of the money and the road will never be built. We've had that experience before. We gave them money for a dedicated purpose, fixing markets. We said this money has to go to fix Kitty Market and Sabbath Market. X amount of money. What happened? The markets never got fixed, but the money gone. At the end of the year, oh, we had to use it for something. They bought some vehicles, they bought something else for somebody, made 2 trips abroad. That is how the money gets spent. Even when it's earmarked. So you gotta be really stupid to just hand taxpayers' money to a cabal here that is venal, that's totally corrupt, has no sense of city. You know, look at what we're spending on Lamaha Street, etc. Because we want to change the city. We campaigned on it. But they're a humbug now, the administration of the city. Their interest is politics, not services to the people of Georgetown.
What about, so this obviously has been going on for a long time. What about if we come to a point where the mayor says, I'm trying to reach out to government, but government is not accommodating me? Is there going to be any time where we're able to turn the page of the past and just start afresh and just get the city to where it should be?
You know, we had an agreement. They talk a lot about power sharing. So once in one of the elections, I think it was 94, we said, why don't we rotate the the mayorship among the major parties? So I think the PNC got their turn. When it was our turn, they refused. Philomena Sahai should have been the mayor. They refused. So this mayor wants to reach out only to fix his own problems. Irfan Ali might not meet him because he wants some duty free or something like that. No, they're not interested in, I don't mean you personally, but you as citizens believe that the mayor wants to reach out to government because he wants development in the city, you're going to be delusional. It's often about personal things. That's what they want to meet the president on. And the president did meet with them. He spoke with them once, the mayor and the deputy mayor. Then, as soon as they left the meeting, they mischaracterized what happened. You can't trust them to accurately represent what goes on. They're not real partners. They come there, and the first sign of pressure, they lie. I recall that vividly, and I said to the president, basically, you're wasting time with these guys, too. Look, they came to the meeting, and then they went back and they told a bunch of lies to the media. They're not genuine about reaching out. When have we not been willing to work with anyone, regardless of what their political affiliation, for the development of our country? When have we not? We were always open to that. If you're genuinely concerned about development, then this is it. But look at it. Patterson, for 6 years, from 2016 to 2020, he couldn't even select a site for the landing of the pipeline, the gas pipeline. But now he has wonderful views about how we should pursue the project. And they're all negative. Oh, we're doing all bad. They're not genuinely concerned about development. It's just all about the game of politics.
So Dr. Jagdeo, just not to have this interview, as much as what we're talking about is very important, just not to have this interview overshadowed by what is now the disaster known as the Mayor and City Council. Can we have a little more understanding of the salary increase? And it's been across the board in the health sector.
Yeah.
People want to hear
salary increase. Well, first of all, again, people are told there'll be no salary increase. And we said we budgeted for a salary increase. They knew we budgeted when the budget was passed. the 2022. Even before I left for Dubai, I was asked at a press conference, and I said there shall be a salary increase before the end of the year. I saw after that they were saying there's no salary increase, although we said there will be a salary increase. The opposition said there's no salary increase, trying to excite the public servants into protesting. There was an 8% salary increase. On a bigger base, they claim that, okay, they increased public service salary cumulatively by 70% in the 5 years. Well, the 8% is on a big base. So what was the quantum of money that went into 8% increase? It's close to $6 billion, 30 million US dollars. That is what 8% increase will put in the pockets of the public servant. 30 million US dollars more per annum. That is what the 8% translates to. People don't look at that, because when you have a percentage on a bigger base, it's a larger quantum of money. So that is what the 8% translates into. 1 year, 30 million US dollars more into the pockets of those in the public service. So that's one thing that was done. But as we mentioned before, and that's why I tried to look at framework, this country has to have a viable economic strategy. And an economic strategy cannot be all about the recurrent budget. Every cent you earn, you eat and you spend on yourself, like wages. You have to plan for the future. You have to create the conditions to create future wealth so we can keep increasing the amount that we eat and we spend on ourselves. How do you do that? You do that through incentives to industry, which we have done through a $40 billion reduction in taxes as soon as we got back. $40 billion reduction in taxes by reversing all of the admin taxes. Secondly, by having conducive policies moving forward, like in some of the sectors, we've further reduced taxes, and like in education and health, we removed the corporate tax, consistent with our manifesto promises. And thirdly, infrastructure. Infrastructure helps to lower unit costs and the cost of doing business. And you see a big focus. I'm not going to go through all of the infrastructure. So that's the balance we strike. We're getting a bit more money now coming into the budget. We still run a fiscal deficit. So the money we get has to go towards two purposes. One is to create the conditions for future wealth, and secondly, to improve people's lives now. You improve people's lives by reducing the taxes so they pay less taxes now, so they have more disposable income, and we've done that. You increase their salaries, that disposable income, which we've done, and then you also create conditions for more people to be employed, like the 11,000 part-time workers who now earn about $6 billion more. They were never earning that before, they were not there. The children got their about 30 million US dollars. They got two, because 200,000 times 30,000 will give you about $6 billion that they're getting back through the $30,000. You know what I'm talking about, because we care grant. So all of this is a package. And people, so they focus only on salaries, and then the vileness of it all. You talk about, racism and everything in the country, and you say, we increased public service salary by 70%. You forgot that you removed the subsidies from the pensioners, water subsidy, took away their joint services bonus, so they lost money. But then, on the other hand, in your 5 years, you didn't give the sugar workers any increase. So they got zero. And they talk about racism. That is it. So that's self-evident. Which year have we done that, given the sugar workers in the entire period a sum of money and not given it the corresponding increases to the public servants? You check back historically. And so that is crucial. Then, apart from what we did here, we said there are some areas where we have to adjust. So we've identified some sectors, and the purpose of the adjustment that the president announced, particularly for the joint services and the health sector, there. So in the joint services, across the discipline services, the 4 agencies, there were big disparities between comparable positions. So like a corporal, here might be earning significantly less than a corporal in another agency. Right, not the band, that's within an agency, but across. Okay. So prisons, fire, army, and police. So what we did, we tried to raise the bottom up. So the minimum salary for a constable went up. So you raise people at the bottom right up. And secondly, you try to fix the disparities between comparable jobs across the services, the joint services. The same thing in the health sector. What happened is that we noticed that, for the medical and technical workers, mainly, these were the medical and technical workers. So the same thing we did. We raised the minimum, and then if you were employed, you're a doctor or a nurse, and you're employed by the Ministry of Health, you earn one salary. The same skill, exact same skill, you earn a salary that was lower than the Georgetown Hospital. And then if you're employed by the regional health, you're the same doctor or nurse, you got another salary that might have even been lower than the Ministry of Health. So you had 3 different categories where a nurse employed in the region will earn one sum, with the same, say, qualification and years. They say another nurse employed by the Ministry of Health would get a different wage and a salary, and a third one by Georgetown Hospital. So what we did, we sought to bring parity across so if you're a nurse or a doctor or something, and you are employed by any of the areas, you get around the same salaries. And that would help large numbers of people. So the cost of it all, outside of the $6 billion I told you for the across the board 8% increase, that will be about $2.5 billion for the two, about 1.6 billion for the health sector, and just over $1 billion for the joint services. So that combined now with the 6 billion, you're talking about 8.5 billion. And if you look at the sugar workers, another close to $1 billion, it's $9.5 billion in salary increases. And I'm only talking about the public sector, not the public corporations as yet. So if you add them, you probably have about $11 billion increase across the public sector in wages and salaries, which will be about 60 million US dollars in this year alone. That will be now in our people's pocket more than they had the previous year. So that is a huge figure. And people, sometimes they don't look at all the moving parts. We don't have the luxury of not doing that. Pick what you want, and sometimes people just pick a little bit here. Oh, we don't have enough here, etc. But we can't, when you manage a country, you have to look at all the parts and find balances so that we can do this over the long term. keep increasing the wages our people get more of them employed, get better working conditions, grow the economy so we don't, if the oil and gas sector collapses or the prices drop significantly, or then we don't have a big shrinkage in terms of economic viability. Because why do you think some countries increase wages a lot at the beginning, and then you see that, and they're based on perceived revenue they will get, and then the oil and gas sector, natural resources sector, the price crashes. So the money doesn't come, massive layoff, they have to cut salaries, etc., because it's not sustainable. And that is why examine those countries. More of them are now in trouble and have a worsening condition than even before they had oil and gas. You can check those conditions. Yeah, sure.
Dr. Jagdeo, I'm very cognizant of the fact that an opportunity like this doesn't come across often, and there are many burning questions that Guyanese have. I'm extremely happy that you mentioned the increases, particularly in the health sector and further joint services. How do you respond to two criticisms? One, that the 8% given to public servants should have been non-taxable. And two, that what about the teachers who are now saying, what about us?
Yeah, but what you just raised with me, I think I answered already. I dealt with context.
Yes.
I dealt with context and magnitude. So the thing is that if we remove all the same tax increases and everything like that, so we've already done 40 billion of taxes. People don't see it, but they don't pay VAT on electricity, on water, on a whole range of stuff that they were paying before. So I think I answered those questions, and as we made it clear, we have to go into addressing disparities first. There was evident, if you are a nurse working in the region, and you're just as qualified as a nurse elsewhere, why should you earn 30-40% less than a nurse working in another state institution? The same thing. So those were the disparities we tried to address. They've been there all along, but now we're trying to fix it. So over time, we'd have to look at maybe qualifications. So it's not just about increased adjustment. This was about tackling disparities across agencies and some of it within agencies. Eventually, we'd have to start differentiating people based on qualifications. So it would represent effort.
Sure.
So, for example, if you have a bachelor's degree and you're working in a job, you might now get the same with a person with a master's degree. Eventually, we have to change that, where the person with a master's can get a premium or on their salary for that effort they made in qualifying. And even all of these things have to be adjusted. So that is the thinking in the future, but it can't be done immediately because of the reasons I told you, because of the need to strike the balance.
I'm happy you said that, because I have heard persons say, I have a master's degree, why am I doing the same?
Where do we live? We live in this country. The same people we're talking to, half of them are our supporters. They come and say this all the time. So we live just here. We are very much aware of all the problems, but I'm aware too, coming out of finance, when we were there in the early days and we paid wages and salaries and our debt, we had to borrow to do that. We could not pay wages and salaries and our debt from our revenue. We had to borrow to pay that. So I have a long memory, and these things you fix progressively. No country, economic development, you have to stick at it for a while until it starts healing. And it is working in our country. If you look at the sustained growth we have had even before oil, our country is changing for the better. Many countries don't have that track record. It's because we've remained firm. We don't have a wishy-washy policy. Look at on the oil and gas. APNU signed the 2016 agreement. They signed an agreement when we had 3 billion barrels of proved oil. You saw how the agreement was signed. The Global Witness report. The people, Exxon helped to draft the agreement. Trotman signed it in spite of advice. So that happened. The terms that we call lopsided are part of that agreement. Today, so things change, the government changed. We were asked in opposition, are you going to change this type of block? We were not expedient. We said no. We said no. If you just go back to all my press conferences, we said no. Any new condition, any new block would have to have new fiscal terms, new PSA, new law, etc. And we've done that, local content. We pointed out how we're going to get more from these blocks. I don't want to go down that route now, because I dealt with that many times before. So we said that in opposition. In government, we remain faithful to exactly what we said. Exactly. No change. They were in government, they signed the agreement, defended it, collected it. They go to Glen Lyle now. Glen Lyle controls the agenda. They're scared. They want to support from Glen Lyle agency. Ramjitan suddenly, he wants to change his agreement. This is Trotman, the general secretary of his party, who signed it. And on the agreement, I think they have the law offices of one of these other members of this party on the agreement itself. And now he wants to change. But he doesn't know, he wouldn't reason it, but it sounds expedient. So he gets in there, it sounds favorable because, the culture, he gets positive review.
The term renegotiate.
Right, well, yes, exactly, renegotiate. But they could have done that. They could have taken a position at the beginning. They signed this agreement. You would think that they're babes in the wood. They're innocent, they just came out of the womb. And they find this agreement here, and so we got to change this agreement. These are people who are complicit in putting us in this mess. We're trying to fix the mess now by a local content law, which they never passed. They had all the years that bring in nearly $700 million to business to our people, Guyanese, forcing the companies. We have now changed the fiscal terms from 2% royalty to 10%. No taxes to 10% tax. A cost recovery limit of 65%, not 75%, and smaller blocks. We put a 10 million minimum for you to secure the right to explore, not the right to develop, for the small blocks, for the shallow blocks, and 20 million, that's a signing bonus for the larger blocks because we've done the option. We're fixing your mess. Instead of being helpful, we're renegotiating, and somehow we are the bad guys. The same thing with Norton, they blow in the wind. They just move because they're not grounded in a philosophy, a firm economic plan. They don't have clarity of vision. They don't know how to achieve what they think they want to achieve. And therefore, that's why every day they're wishy-washy on policies. We are not that way. We play the long game. We play the long game. And that is why, but the long game is the only game that secures lasting benefits for your people. The long game. It doesn't sound attractive too much. We don't play a short innings where you just go and hit the ball for 4 sixes and you're out. We are playing the long game here. And that's what's characterized us in the BP. So that is how we approach things. So that's what I would say about the audits, the other agencies and stuff. People are going to see the increases over time, but it has to be balanced by other objects. Look at
sustainable.
Yes, sustainable. It has to be sustainable. We're spending probably $30 billion now on community roads. So you may not get it there, but you're going to see a concrete road in front of your home, that has to be paid for. You might not get a salary increase when you're public servant, right? But you see a concrete road appear in front of your road, right? Yeah, exactly. Well, next year we're planning to take every road and bridge to every public facility that is government offices, hospitals, schools must be fixed. So our children can move in comfort when they get dropped off across the country. That is one of the things we're approaching in the next budget, because that's important for us. Our children going in comfort to school and stuff, some of the roads are in a bad shape and all of that. Parents to drop them off. So you're getting another set of benefits there. The gas to energy project may not be right here now, but when that comes, you get another benefit, stable power and half the price.
I know that government is focusing a lot on infrastructure. We've seen massive infrastructural works across the country. But then you look at smaller things like the roads, and government is making an effort to redo roads that need to be done, and then a couple of months or so after, a pothole appears. How is government dealing with that? Because it's obviously
it's tough. When you're doing, you have 3,000 projects going on simultaneously. You have a small contractor's core. So we are trying to give more work to different people here. And if you look at it. So you inevitably, you're going to have, even in some of the best contracts, some people who are not going to do the work according to standard. That is why we've urged communities to be vigilant. So we can't stop and say we'll only award 100 roads because these are the 10 best contractors and we'll only work with them. If we do that, we'll never change this country. So some of this is like almost expected that shoddy work would be done, but if the communities work along with us, then they can avoid some of this happening. And then we made it clear to the contractors that you do this, you have no future. If we find we must link their future growth as contractors in this country to the quality of work that they do. So we have to, and I urge people, you know how many people have sent that to me, like images?
Yes.
They send me an image of a road that's completed and the edge is broken off because a tractor or somebody drive a piece of equipment that has the steel track on it. So I get the name, I send it over to Public Works. They show me a pothole that is developed, I send it to Public Works. And I said on one of the critics program before that people shouldn't believe this is a criticism if they post it. They should send it to the Minister of Public Works, because then we become aware that we ask the engineers to go and check it, and then people have to remedy this work. So with the citizens getting more involved and giving us the feedback, we can track in Public Works, Edgehill or in Dar, can track the 4,000 roads we're building. Right? But if citizens help us, and this is the way they can do that, send the pictures to them, directly to their phones, to the permanent secretary, to any minister. It then gets shared back into the group.
And are these, you mentioned that they wouldn't get future works, but is there a direct policy that if you do shoddy work on 2 projects or 1 major project?
So far they have not blacklisted, but this comes up at the evaluation stage. When they're being evaluated, this man has 5 roads and he done 2 shoddy. So you may not blacklist, but they don't get the work. I think we might have to move to a formal system in the future of blacklisting.
Dr. Jagdeo,
but the alternative is not to do much, because we don't have enough people to do all these civil works now. It's a lot.
We're mere days away from the calendar year and by extension the government year coming to a close. Inflation is affecting the world, and this government has become known for pulling tricks out of bags reversing taxes and giving incentives and $1 million for house lots, free foundation, steel, and so on. And just recently the 8%, and then a lot of raises across the board, balancing out things. Basically 15 days. Any more tricks up your sleeve, or we gotta wait for the next budget?
No, I'm pleased in the last month particularly that we have had a lot of things that are important for our country, but often you don't get enough publicity. And you know, the first one is the ART certifying us as the first jurisdiction scale for certification in the world. We are the only country. We now have the largest forest carbon trading scheme in the world ever. Bigger than any country in the world ever. And for only 30% of our credit, we have sold at a minimum $750 million US. So 70% of our credit remains to be sold. As I said before, the Amerindians are going to get 112 million at a minimum from that, which is above the Amerindian forests, like title lands have forests, which is just about 12% of total forest mass. And they are now getting at least 15% of all we earn directly. So more than what their share of forest is in the national level. So that brings me to a couple of days ago. We see a new thing happening. The gripers that have showed up again. The APA. The APA has been writing now, and as I speak now, they're in Canada telling a bunch of lies again. Vanessa Ben is at that meeting, who represents us in Canada, about the 2006 Amerindian Act and about the carbon trading scheme. So the 2006 Amerindian Act was a major advance from the one before, but they would not tell people that where subsurface rights were given for the first time in Guyana to Amerindian people. Only maybe 2 countries in the world have given subsurface rights. But they're in Canada, that Canada has never given its indigenous people subsurface rights, but they're bad-mouthing us in Canada. APA never participated in the first low carbon development strategy. They were opposed to it. They were linked to the AFC and the others trying to block it. And then the second one, they participated for a while, but then they accepted that, but didn't show. So their point now, the key criticism is that, the carbon rights belong to the indigenous people. Carbon rights are not assigned like subsurface rights. They belong to the country. That's one. 2, they believe that they are more important than the 200 and something elected leaders who formed the NTC, who agreed to this. The APA that doesn't represent a single person, they can't go to the village and the village would say, we want you to represent us ahead of the Tushao. But it's all to raise money. They have to show a dispute to raise money. So they must be now in Canada on European taxpayers' money, possibly European taxpayers' money, because they get a grant from the European Union, to badmouth our country. They would not bring a single benefit to indigenous people. This is the APA that was in bed with APNU in 2015, because the head of APA at that time was the deputy head of their list. And that stayed quiet when Granger tried to water down Amerindian land rights, and we had to fight it off by putting up this commission that would have mixed up ancestral lands with Amerindian land rights. That's one. That where not Felix, the other one, I forgot his name, he's forgettable. In Parliament, Pete Scott. Pete Scott said, if indigenous people get more land, they can get no benefit from the oil and gas industry. You recall that, it's been in the public domain. They didn't get any new land title, and the APA was embedded that. Suddenly, they're opposed to this. So they say, oh, carbon rights belong to indigenous people and stuff. Then the Starbuck News now gets fringe elements. A member of the APA from Region 9, he writes a letter, then they editorialize on it. Another one from somewhere, the University of Ghana, Thomas Smith, he writes a letter, they editorialize on the letter. So this is what happens. They can't be happy for our successes. They can't be happy for the successes of our country and our people and indigenous people. They always have to find negatives. They will never come up with a deal that would remotely bring $100,000 to Amerindian communities. Because when APA gets the money from the other agencies, from the international bodies, it doesn't spend it on indigenous people. They wouldn't bring 100,000, but oppose the deal that will bring in $112 million at a minimum to the Amerindian communities, and we still have 70% more to go. So imagine if you look at that, you'll end up with over $300 million going to the US dollars, going to the Amerindian communities if we extrapolate from the 30% and say we get the same terms for the rest of the 70%. It will be over $300 million. 100 billion Ghanaian dollars, maybe, nearly close to $100 billion. Maybe 80 billion going to the Amerindian community to be shared equitably among all the villages. This is outside of what they will get through infrastructure. That's directly, and they're opposed to it. So that's what the negatives we see all the time. Some people can't be happy, and they're fringe. A Janet Vulcan never made any difference to a single indigenous life, or the APA here. So we are proud of that, and we'll fight the negatives. It's always the same. You have another thing, the gas energy. You can't be proud that our country has moved in record time to do something that Europe is trying to do now, use more gas to generate power. And we're moving it closer to reality. So one person now has come up, who was an environmentalist, said, oh, the last one was, it would contaminate the groundwater now, the gas, because she become a geologist. These are the sort of things. The auction, they should be happy. Bloomberg just had a podcast yesterday and talked about the quality of decision-making in Guyana and this auction and how the country is moving forward. But if you listen to some of the locals. So we're very pleased about the big policy changes we're making too, and getting these major things that require a lot of technical work going, whilst we are not forgetting the concerns of our people. The roads and the water and the electricity and all of that, and the cost of living, as you mentioned. So it's not just focusing on those things, it's focusing the balance again. The big things that will transform whilst trying to improve their lives and adjust to unexpected things like the cost of living increases. That's why our policy making is so diverse, varied, and caters for different levels of problems. So that's very important for us. I'm not going to enumerate all that we did on the cost of living side. We've seen an abatement in global prices a bit now because oil prices have come down, and the supply chains are getting better. With the opening up of China, China will go through a difficult period. They've just removed COVID restrictions. They'll have to go through what we went through with maybe massive overload of the hospitals and deaths and stuff before they normalize. But once they normalize and it becomes like they have herd immunity, then you should see a massive return back to the reliable supply chains that you had before COVID, which kept the prices down. So we're hoping that a lot of these things would be addressed.
Government went to Parliament for another $47 billion as part of the supplementary budget. You touched on all that government is doing to improve the lives of Guyanese, but can you specifically talk about how those monies, as well as the withdrawal from the Natural Resource Fund, how those monies will be used to improve the lives of Guyanese?
Well, I just gave you the entire framework, because the framework says total revenue flows from the NRF and from taxes, it's X. Total number of expenditure, total value of the expenditure is Y. The Y has Y1, which is capital, and Y2 is the recurrent budget. So the fiscal deficit is the difference between X and Y. And we still have a fiscal deficit. When you subtract our expenditure from our total revenue, which includes the NRF and everything else, we still have a deficit that we have to finance. So it's not like we're in surplus as yet.
Okay.
And so people have to keep that in mind. That is how that sets up their. Yes, exactly. And they have to keep this in mind. It's not as though we're running a surplus. In the future years, we may be running a surplus once the large oil inflows come in. But right now, it's small sums that are coming in. In the first 2 years, we got $600 million in the first 2 years of oil production. The bridge across the river alone went to be $261 million.
When can we see work on that beginning?
Oh, apparently they're doing work now, because they have to do testing the work. They're doing boreholes now, because from what I gather, where each one of those structures will go, they have to understand the geology there. And so that work is being done. That would ensure that the final designs be ready. But we still believe it will be done within a 2 years time frame. 2 years it will be completed. And that will coincide with the 4-lane completion from Crane to the bridge, the development, the gas to energy project, the 4-lane from Ogle that has a 2 years time to will come to the bridge. So large. They're coming along the lines. So far, we haven't had any major slippage on timelines on any one of these projects. But I'm just saying that this is very important for us. By the way, I didn't want to finish because AFC had a press conference, and so Ramjatan was incoherent as usual. But he talks about us undermining democracy. I don't know, we need to get this man some institutional help, because he forgets that he was the one, and I want him to go to the COI. Can't we encourage him? Can't you call him and ask him to present his evidence to the COI about the Russians? You remember he caught these Russians, he was passionate, and he had to put them on a vehicle and take them straight to the airport and deport them, the ones who came to help us rig the elections. So he can present all of this. He has all the files and everything else. He should go there, and that would make a sensational story and turn the whole COI on its head, because that means we were the ones trying to rig the elections, not them. So can't you get this man to go there? Can we help to get him to go?
Can you help us?
So that's one. And two, he said, oh, there's a surreptitious move that on the 5th of December 2022, the PPP removed the residency requirement quietly from the Representation of People Act and the National Registration Act. When we went to Parliament, we removed the residency requirement and turned surreptitiously. This has been in the public domain for almost 8 months. The explanation, and I'm surprised a lawyer, this man is a lawyer, the explanation is when the Constitution removed that in 2001. The law is inconsistent with the Constitution of Guyana. So now that we have a ruling from the Chief Justice, then the law has to be consistent, an ordinary law, with the supreme law of the country, which is the Constitution of Guyana. It is just to make it compliant with the Constitution based on the ruling, the constitutional amendment and the ruling. But he finds a conspiracy in that. It's a pure clown show that would rival any circus in the world that they practice every time I see them appear at a press conference. Pure clown show. I'm not joking. All they need to do is to put on the little nose thing here, and this country would have a festive season. You know, we're in Christmas season. Yeah.
Candace, I'm leaving it up to you at last for words, and we've been at it for some time now. If you would close with something interesting.
So 2022 is coming to a close. How satisfied are you with government's performance over the past year?
I just told you, right?
Score it on a report card.
I'm not one for scoring. You leave that to the opposition. They took A's for themselves all the time. You recall the scorecard? They publish it in the newspapers. They remove a sign. They put up a new sign at a building, and they score A for that. So a bunch of frivolous things. I would say how we have moved this country forward. Our per capita GDP now has moved to over about $18,000. Secondly, we have had a difficult year in terms of inflation, but we've managed to address it in a manner that is seriously more favorable to people than many of our peers. In Suriname, the inflation rate was over 40%. In Venezuela, it's over 100-something%. In the US, you saw how it's raging. We have tackled that big problem. We've managed to get some of the major policy initiatives moving. I mentioned just some of them. So we have managed to increase disposable income. I just told you about our people now have about $60 million more in their pockets this year than they had last year. That is only on wages and salary side, leaving out the other things that I mentioned. Leaving out the other things. So that's a lot of money. So overall, I think we've managed to get more people employed. 11,000 people on the part-time jobs alone are working, taking home a salary now. More of them are working. We've had more people trained. So I think overall, we've put a lot of effort into it, lots of work, a lot of behind-the-scenes work to make these things happen. So it's pleasing that things are going in a direction, but if you know the PPP, we're never satisfied. Next year we'll return to this with the same vigor and the same focus and the same orientation, with the same goals in mind, which would be to change our people's lives for the better.
Right, Jagdeo, I want to thank you for this opportunity once again, and I want to thank you, the viewers, for tuning in, and I'm hoping this has brought much needed clarity to you. Thanks once again.
Thank you. Thank you.